Welcome, everybody, to the Wonder Boldly podcast. I'm Christine Santos, bringing to you all of the action steps and knowledge I've learned on my journey to becoming an online business owner, quit my corporate job, and now live the life that I desire on my own terms. This podcast is jam-packed with all the knowledge I've gained over the past few years growing my online business. I am so passionate about you going after what it is that you want. I want to encourage and motivate you to know that you too can live the life that you desire. Thank you so much for listening. Let's go. Hello and welcome to another episode of Wonder Boldly. Today I have with me Jen Boyle. And Jen is a leadership and communications expert and the CEO of the Lead Quietly company. She is the host of the Lead Quietly podcast. She leads a welcoming community for quiet and introverted women, and her mission is to show quiet women that they can be great leaders in business and career and life without being loud. She teaches women how to be stronger leaders, more effective communicators, and how to build credibility and online presence without having to be on social media 24/7. She is a master's educated communications professional with 20 plus years of experience in the communications industry and more than 15 years building and leading high-performing teams. It's an honor to have her here with me. Thank you so much, Jen, for being here.
Thank you, Christine. I'm so excited to be on your podcast, finally.
Yes, let's talk about Lead Quietly. How did you come to this? And where do you envision your company, Lead Quietly, going?
I love this. It's funny how I chose the name Lead Quietly from brainstorming, as many of us do, to pick our business name. I knew I wanted to work with the quieter ones, like the quieter women, the more introverted women. And I use both quiet and introverted on purpose because like we're talking about the definition of introvert or definition of extrovert can mean all different things to different people. But I knew I wanted to work in leadership and I wanted to help women in particular be stronger leaders and be more confident leaders. But I also knew I wanted to work with more quiet women. And so I wanted to combine those two things together. And it's all based on my own leadership journey and my own leadership experience, how I got there. And then the name Lead Quietly, it just came when you get the right combination of brainstorming words and put them together and if the handle is taken or not. And that's how you choose. But I like it not only as the name of my company, but the name of an approach. Like to lead quietly is like an action you can take. It's an approach you can take. And so sometimes I like to use it in that way too.
So how do you define introvert?
Yes. So I'm sure there's like a dictionary definition. I look at introvert and extrovert using the definition of where you get your energy from. So it's not necessarily your personality or kind of who you are. It is, but that's not the only thing. It's, do you get energy and recharge your batteries by being alone and having quiet time? That I consider more introverted. Or on the extroverted side, do you get your energy, recharge your batteries by being with people, being in action, being out around with lots of activity? And I know I lean more towards the introvert side. And again, I don't know all humans in the whole world, how everyone is, but I think we're all a blend of both. And there are times when introverts can appear really extroverted, or we have our moments of extroversion. Same for extroverts. We're like, I'm tired. They need to recharge alone sometimes. I feel like how I define which one you lean to is the majority of the time, how do you recharge? What do you need more? And I know personally, I need more quiet time to think, to get my thoughts together, than I need busy social time. So it's not necessarily being outgoing or not, or talkative or not. And I think that's the difference. Introverts can be incredibly talkative with the right scenario. One-on-one, if you get yourself into a deep conversation, I could talk for hours. At a party, making small talk with strangers, it won't last very long and I'll be ready to go home.
Yeah, I love that. So that leads us right into What are some of the approaches when you are helping women lead quietly? I often think of the amazing women and men that would come into my office, and I would encourage them to speak up in a meeting. If you maybe have a team meeting, speak up in a team meeting. Or if you are going to a management meeting, maybe you have a question, take those steps to get comfortable. I would always be like, you are so fabulous. This is such a great idea. Let's do a presentation in the auditorium. They're hightailing out of my office.
Yeah, no thanks.
That's not happening.
No.
And I get it, and I'm being funny, but I really truly wanted them to share this message with a wider audience. And so I'm wondering, looking to you as a leader in this way, like how do you help people who can still lead, but lead quietly?
Oh, I love that example so much. I think it starts with being comfortable with yourself. And the one way that I hope I can help people is, especially the quiet or the introverted ones, is to begin to see their quiet nature not as a weakness. And I think it starts there because in the management meeting scenario or the team meeting scenario, typically, like there's a good chance a team is going to be made up of different personalities, some loud, some not. There might be those few who talk all the time, who take all the airspace, and that's many of our workplaces that we work in. And if you maybe have a history of your work history where you've always been the quiet one and you're pegged that way, you don't typically speak up, you keep your head down, you're a hard worker and people really know you can do it and they like you, but you might not necessarily be the center of attention. It can breed almost a identity of that's who I am and it's a weakness. And so one example of why I thought that myself was on performance evaluation time every year, where you have to go into your boss and say, how have I grown? What do I need to work on this year? I used to, for years, write, I need to be more assertive as like a weakness, as something I needed to work on every year for, I swear, 10 years. Did I ever do anything about it? No. But it shows how I thought it was a weakness. I thought it was something I lacked in order to be good at my job. So that's where I would start is like being a quieter communicator or not necessarily wanting to speak up. Many of the quieter introverted people that I know don't think well on their feet. There's nothing worse than someone saying, let's do brainstorming right now. We're like, oh, I haven't had any time to think about it. And so therefore they don't contribute and then they feel worse. Then they feel like they're failing or they're not as good as their colleagues who are quick on their feet. So helping show the quieter introverted ones that are not inherently like broken or weak and that these are actually strengths that you can use. And so then I would say another approach is to teach you how to use those strengths for good, like how to use them in a productive way. And for example, listening is underrated. There's a lot of talking at work and not always a lot of listening sometimes. It depends on the culture, but being a good listener and not just hearing, but listening. And that kind of ties with another trait of being highly perceptive, another one being emotional intelligence, being able to sense people's feelings in the room. Extroverts can do that too, but if you're more sensitive and you're observing more, you're perceptive, you're quieter, there's a good chance you're picking up on things that other people might not see. So those are great strengths that you have that you can use for good. You can sense something is off in the group and then follow up later one-on-one with someone and say, hey, you seemed off today. Can I help you? What's going on? And you might actually find an answer to whatever the team is working on that wouldn't have been solved by everyone just having to speak up in the moment at the meeting.
I really like that. And I think that's one of the qualities that I always found, again, generally speaking, is that thoughtful taking what they're saying, very intentionally thinking about it and not being comfortable with saying XYZ because they haven't had a chance to think about it and because they care about the quality of their work. So you just saying that made me put that package around it. I could really see that where I would have people saying, I'm not comfortable saying XYZ because I haven't had my time to go and sit and think about it. Sitting in a room, brainstorming, which we do in the company I was at was a huge thing. That's what you do. Get in a room, let's spitball, let's brainstorm. No idea is wrong. And you're thinking as somebody who's not in the introvert shoes that that's going to help them. When you say, don't worry about it. No, it's no idea is wrong. We're just spitballing. It's okay.
You couldn't have said that better. Exactly. And it varies person to person, but they're thinking, okay, but I'm still uncomfortable. And there's something that's like stopping them from speaking out loud, whether it's their own like inner critic that's going on, or they're worried about judgment about someone else, or sometimes it's physically, you're just not as fast. Like you just don't process as quickly and you can't figure out how to phrase something quick enough. And then the moment's gone. And then you sink back down and then you're ruminating, oh, shoot, I missed the moment. And then you're not listening to what's being said. And then you miss the next moment. And then it can be a cycle. So one of the, it sounds so obvious, but the art of follow-up can be a very good strategy for people who find themselves like not speaking up in the moment is if you have thoughts after the meeting, later that day, later that night, the next day, and if it feels productive, like it will help, then it's writing your thoughts in an email and sending it to whoever needs to see it. And I think many people think because brainstorming in the moment is the norm, that it's wasted effort to follow up later. And it's like trying to normalize that everyone thinks differently. And so I would encourage, yes, send the follow-up later.
That's a great strategy. What are other strategies that would help in those scenarios that you share with folks?
Imagine those people who are coming into your office and who have all these ideas and they feel like they have the ideas, but there's a mismatch between that and would they ever go for that promotion or would they ever step up to lead that project or something like that? And I'm thinking about ways to help them see that they could actually be leaders and they could step up to lead that project. They could go for the promotion. They could go for that next thing. So I always come back to self. It starts with how you feel about yourself and how you see yourself. And I like to, in my content and in the words that I write and on my own podcast, talk a lot about that it's up to you to see yourself as a leader and it's available to you right now. That you don't have to wait for permission for someone else to say your leadership material. You can decide that and continue to work on that and grow your confidence. And I know that sounds nice, but like, how do I actually do that? So it starts with self. And then it does help in terms of strategies is to know your stuff. Whatever your job is, whatever it is, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in business or whatever it is, you want to be elected into a position or you want to be the volunteer of the PTA or whatever it is, when you know your stuff and you can communicate what you know, that is a huge help. You could have a very extroverted, natural born leader who doesn't know their stuff. Or you could have the quieter one who can back up their claims, who can communicate clearly, who can speak in an organized way, get a message across that makes sense. And those are two different styles of leadership, but that one, the quieter one, can be just as effective as the other one. So I don't know if that answered your question, but those are some ideas of start to see yourself as a leader, almost anoint yourself, and then work on knowing your stuff. And then we can work on communication later. Start there because it's a journey. It's a journey to learn how to put yourself up there. And I will say over my career, it's easier now than it was when I was a junior employee, obviously.
And I want to highlight the fact that you, Jen, are like an exceptional communicator in written, spoken word. It's unbelievable.
I love that. And you can answer this another time if you want. I'm curious, what is it that makes you say so? Because I'm very curious as I teach others, I would love to know what makes it so good for you.
It is the clarity. It is the flow. Things go together. You have a start, you have a middle, and you have an end. As somebody consuming what you're either saying or writing, it's easy to understand and follow.
I love that. Thank you. Sorry, I put you on the spot to answer a question on your own podcast.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
But those things that you've said is exactly what I strive to do through communications by being a communications professional. And it can seem so obvious. Everyone communicates, but not everyone communicates well.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you help folks in that manner? And how would you go about doing that?
Oh, I love this question. To do good communications, let's start with that. There's a few essential elements, and that's where I would start with. There's the audience. You need to know who they are and where they're at, what information they need from you, depending on the situation. If I use an example of a corporate organization or something like that, or giving a speech or something like that, you should know who the audience is before you speak to them or write to them or whatever it is. So that's one of the core elements. And then on the other side is the message. What is it that you are trying to get across and why? And so those are like the give and take or the ebb and flow, the two sides of these things. There's the audience and then the message. And what we're going to figure out is how to get the message to the audience in a way that they'll understand, that they'll know what action to take or what to do next, if anything, and through the right medium or the right channel of where they're going to find that information. And so that's comms 101 or some of the basics of communications. What I would start with is, say you had to give a speech. I like a good bullet outline, just a little bit of prep or a good bullet outline for whatever you're doing, if you're speaking or you're writing, to start with who's the audience. And then what's really important sometimes is missed, and what makes communications, I think, go wrong or go badly is you don't understand the purpose or the objective of what you're trying to do. In the speaking example, if you are giving a presentation to your coworkers, why are you there? So often people just start with some slides. They just make a bunch of slides and they get up there and they start talking about the slides, but they have no idea what they're trying to achieve. Are you trying to convince the audience of something? Are you trying to tell them about something? What do you really want them to take away or remember? And then it becomes very boring. It's, I don't know, you lost me, no one's paying attention. So know your audience, think about the objective. And so another example besides speaking would even be if you're an entrepreneur and you're writing an email to your email list, what are you trying to do with this email? Are you educating? Are you entertaining? Are you sharing a story? Are you trying to persuade them? Is it a sales email? What is the purpose and what is the objective? And I find you can write a better email when you know the purpose. And then even if you draft it, come back to it, like after you've written it, and you think, does this achieve the purpose that I wanted? Yes, no, then you can edit and tweak. But so many people don't do that. And then they're just putting out random stuff and then wondering, why isn't this working? So, audience, the purpose, figure out your message. Less is more, few points better. Even though I will say that one caveat is I am a long form writer and we could talk about that and I will go at length, but I try and keep it around the same purpose and the same point. I don't try and say 10 things in one long email. I'm saying 2 or 3 things over and over again in different ways. So those can help. And then a call to action. If there's a call, is there something you want them to do or a main takeaway? So those would be 4 simple sort of like best practices that you could remember no matter what kind of communication. So I would help people just organize their thoughts along those 4 things.
Yeah, that's excellent.
One of the mistakes I see a lot of in the corporate world, especially, and in like online space or online content as well, is people communicating as if, and the person who's speaking is already 3 steps into the conversation, and the audience is like, what? Like, you lost me because you didn't set up any context. I don't know why you're here. What are you talking about? And I have that happen in my professional life all the time. So, like, other managers, like that project that we're doing and blah, 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 blah. And you're just like, back up. What is this? And so that's a mistake I see a lot of people making is like you're halfway through the conversation when you're jumping into it with your audience, and they might need you to back up a little bit, slow it down, break it into chunks, say less, say one thing at a time, some of those things, especially because online we assume everyone sees everything we post and they don't.
In corporate, how my experience of how that would translate is somebody may feel like they don't want to ask a question. Everybody in the room is thinking the same thing. So maybe Christine manager has come in and I start in, okay, so we're going to do this and we're going to talk to this customer. And people are like, what are you talking about? But nobody wants to ask because they don't want to be the person that doesn't understand or doesn't know.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. And I don't know the solution to that except for years of experience makes it easier to be okay with looking dumb. I don't feel as worried now because I'm in a leadership position, so that helps. But it is very hard. And sometimes there's a way to ask a side question that kind of makes the person go back to explain the original bits or whatever. But sometimes you just have to go with it and then try and figure it out later.
Yeah. In regards to Lead Quietly, you also have a Facebook group, right? And can you
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about the Facebook group and who's in there and what is, like you said, what is the purpose of the Facebook group?
Yeah, so it's called the Quiet Leader Community on Facebook. It's free. It's small right now, and I like it that way. I like that it's small because I know everyone in there. I know everyone's name. I know a little bit of who they are and what their story is, and they likewise, I hope, know me a little bit too. I'm really not a huge fan of giant Facebook groups full of strangers for this purpose. So I'll get to the purpose. I don't mind the big groups if you're there just to be a spectator and you really want, or it's entertaining or whatever it is. It has its time and place. What I wanted to create with the Quiet Leader community is a more intimate setting and something that feels welcoming and inclusive. So it's mainly entrepreneurs in there. I have a few women in there who are in 9 to 5s, and many of us, like myself, who are entrepreneurs and 9 to 5ers at the same time, who are still working a corporate job while we're building our businesses. Inclusive and welcoming was a really important quality for me because what I really want to do is spark conversation and have deep conversations inside the group. That's the purpose that I'm going for, to create a space for deeper conversation, almost like you go to a party and there's a small group who are hanging out in the kitchen together, really having a good conversation. I don't want to be out in the noisy living room where all the action is. This is for the deeper conversation. People are like, wow, what are you doing? Tell me about you. And they're really interested. So I wanted to create a space that felt like that, because some of the Facebook groups for business in particular, for entrepreneurship, can be loud or salesy, or it's all about promoting your stuff and have a purpose too. But I wanted something different than that. And I wanted the quieter ones to feel like they could speak up in there if they wanted to. But at the same time, one of like my rules of the group is that if you want to lurk in here and don't say anything, that is just fine too. That I don't want to make you feel guilty for getting value out of being somewhere and getting value just out of consuming. That's totally fine. Maybe you're not ready to talk. Maybe you don't feel like talking. That's okay. And I wanted to normalize that inside my group. So that's what it would be for anyone if they're interested in joining. You could be an entrepreneur, you could be working on your career. The thing that we all share in common is that we have ambitions and we have goals and we have something we want to do or bring into the world. And I tend to focus a bit on the professional goals, like business, career, something that you want to do like that. So that's who it's for, and that's what it's all about.
Nice. And how long has that? You've had that a while, right?
Yeah, I've had it for a year and a half now. And like I said, it's small. But what's funny about that is I started it because I thought I should. Like many of us fall into the entrepreneurial trap where we're like, I need this, I need that, I need one of those. I better get on my email list and do all these things. And it sat quiet for a long time because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't have a purpose until at some point I let myself think in true quiet introvert way. I let myself think, I let myself ruminate, listen and observe what people were missing, what people wanted, and then took some time to create it. So I try to hang out in there every week now, and sometimes it's quieter, sometimes it's more active, and that's the flow. So
Nice. And how can people find out about the Facebook group?
just search for the Quiet Leader Community on Facebook.
And you also have a podcast, the Lead Quietly podcast. Tell us about that and how that's going for you.
Oh, I love my podcast. And I just want to shout out Christine because it would not exist if you did not help me launch it through your program from idea to launch. And you helped me launch it in 2 months. I think it was just over 2 months. And it's one of those things that I thought I would do someday. And someday always just got pushed further and further down the road. And I think I probably told you this story, and I actually wrote an email about it that just came out today about how I started my podcast by accident, where it was the group that you and I were in together, the leader of that group called me out saying, "Oh, Jen's starting a podcast," after just casually mentioning it. "Oh yeah, I think I'm going to start a podcast." And then she said, "Okay, what date are you launching?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know, June." And then she announced to the whole group, "Jen's starting her podcast in June, guys." And then I was like, "Oh man, I got to start a podcast." That's how it started, which is so funny. And then you reached out to me and got me going, and you made a plan, you held me to it, you helped me every step of the way, and it was the most amazing thing. I never would have done it. I wouldn't have finished without you. So thank you. Thank you for
Yeah. I have to say, you are like the perfect definition of action taker in starting a podcast. So you did the things that whole checklist, and you did all the things, but most importantly, you gave yourself space. There was time in there that you gave yourself space, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna not do this week, whatever, I can't remember, but and so you owned your experience that worked well for you. So I think that was really valuable. And then also since then, you're super consistent. You're very consistent, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I love it now, which I almost didn't know in the beginning. And that's the funny thing about taking risks and trying new things is that you don't know what you're going to love. And even as an introverted person, I would think, am I going to love talking out loud all the time, every week on a podcast? And I actually do. And this is a great example of leading quietly, I hope. Of what I'm going to tell you is so it's pretty common for interviews to be the style of podcasts, right? Like we're having an interview right now. There's so much benefit to it. It's interesting. People like that kind of content. And I do too. And as I was getting started in my content and my podcast schedule every week, I knew I wanted to be consistent. And I have a full-time job. I've got little kids, I've got a busy family, and I only have so much time every week to do my podcast. And I knew to do interviews, I just wouldn't have the capacity to do it. It's hard. I have to book times at night around kid activities and all these things. And I didn't want to do that. I don't want to do it right now, even though it's going against the grain of what is the gold standard, perhaps, or like a good thing that you should do in podcasting. So I choose to do solo episodes only. And it's a little different than some. I'm not saying I'm completely original, but it's a choice to do this my own way. And that's part of what I call leading quietly. So I do these solo episodes and I just share my topic of the week. And this helps me love it. I feel excited to do it. I can fit it into my week around the things without sacrificing like kid time or family time. I'm not trying to do it at lunch, at work, and those kinds of things. And I can stay consistent, which if I put too much pressure on myself to do a bunch of things that really aren't a fit for me right now, then I could not stay consistent.
And I think that's so important. That's exactly what I was saying, in that even when you were in the phase of idea to launch, you knew your capacity and you knew where you wanted to be and where you wanted to go. And that is what honestly got you to the launch. It didn't really have anything to do with Christine. Yes, I reached out to you and I said, let's do this thing because that's how I am. Let's go to the auditorium and
Yes, I'm so glad you did.
but it was because you own your experience, just like you're saying with being consistent. You're like, okay, this is the way I'm going to do it because I know this is the capacity right now. Beautiful. I love that.
And I think for so many, if I could speak to your listeners, the entrepreneurs out there, or if you're in a corporate job and you feel like you're trying to fit yourself into other boxes, or you're trying to do things a certain way because you think that's how it's done and it's not right for you, let this be your permission that you can do things a little differently. This is like a great example to me of leadership, of like self-leadership, is I'm choosing to do this intentionally, not because I'm failing by not doing interviews. I don't see it that way. I'm choosing to do this. I'm sticking to my goals and I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm just like poking along on my journey. I'm leading myself to where I want to go. And that feels empowering, especially like for those who are listening who feel like they don't have any power in their life, or everything is for someone else, or they're trying to mold and fit themselves into all these identities that really aren't them. It can feel so empowering to say, I choose this and I'm going to do it my way. Anyway, that's my little soapbox. I want more people to feel that.
I love that. That's beautiful. Anything else today that you'd like to add that we haven't talked about?
Just a reminder that like leadership is something that is accessible to anyone, whether it's like in a formal title or not, or if you are trying to start a business right now, and I know many of your listeners might be doing that. I want you, if you can, to call yourself a leader, call yourself the CEO or the boss or the founder or the whatever it is. When you give yourself that title, when you give it to yourself, that's the important part. Write it down in your e-signature, whatever it is. Call yourself the thing you want to be, and that will help boost your confidence. It's this tiny little thing that anyone can do and can set you like on the right path, and you can have a little more energy and just take a little bit of that power that you deserve to have. So you don't have to be loud, you don't have to be in your face. You can do these small, quiet things and feel really strong and effective. So that's what I would like to leave people with.
I love that. Thank you so much. That's awesome. One thing that I did want to mention is your free guide. We'll put the links in the show notes. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So it's called The Introvert's Guide to Building Online Presence for Business. And it's a like a resource guide, and it's pretty long. So it's detailed and in depth, which is my style, and I'm owning it. So I hope it's really valuable that way. And the purpose of it is it's meant to help you find a way to build that foundation or find your home base online for your business. So many of us start on social media and we're trying to keep up with posting and reels, and it can just feel never ending, exhausting. And then you feel like you don't really have that home, you don't have that foundation of your business. And so the guide walks you through two different strategies that are alternatives to social media. So you can figure out different ways that might work for you with long form content or community building. And I break it down for how to actually implement it. So it's not just here's some strategies, but I actually walk you through the steps of here's what to do. And I based it all on my own experience of how I have built the brand Lead Quietly online. So I love it. It's really helpful, I hope, and you can walk through those steps yourself and see what fits for you.
Yeah, it's really great. Definitely grab that. It'll be in the show notes. Thank you, Jen, so much. I could talk forever about this stuff.
I know, me too. Isn't it funny? Introverts could just talk all day in the right conversation.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you liked it, it would mean the world to me if you give it a 5-star review and recommend it to a friend. I so appreciate you listening, and I hope that these episodes motivate you and inspire you to go after your dreams. Until next time, continue to wonder boldly.